Welcome to Minding My Business. I hope you're having a blessed up day. And if you're not, hopefully today's episode is going to bless you up. This was a show dedicated to celebrating people that have created a lane for themselves and are doing extraordinary things in the world. Today's powerhouse guest is Tanner Chidester. I hope I said that right. He
Perfect.
has generated over $100 million in sales. He's the founder and owner of EliteCEOs.com. He has also mentored over 50,000 business owners, helping them build their business online, and has a free, I say a free university to help people also build their businesses online. So, wow, this is a lot. And thank you so much, Tanner, for blessing us up today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm super excited to be here. So just ask away. I'll do my best.
Okay. All right. So before there is a career, because you could have chosen any single career, there's so many careers to choose from. What got you into this career of helping people build businesses online?
So I started off in the fitness industry. I dropped out of school. I was going to be an engineer and I was playing football. When football ended, I started to realize I didn't really want to just go work a job. I had a
Mhm.
mentor who told me to get into fitness. And, that's what I'd done my whole life. I've been athletic. So what happened is I started building an online fitness company that did super, super well. And as I did really well, I had people start asking me for help. And so it naturally progressed this direction. It definitely was not planned. I didn't think this is where I would end up. But I think that's just part of what happens when you start having success with something people ask. And there was a big opportunity. So I just dived into it.
And I mean, like, wow, 50,000 people that you've helped mentor. I mean, building, what did you say, $100 million in sales, like those are a lot of responsibilities. And one of my favorite quotes is like, with great power comes great responsibility, but with great responsibility comes greater power. And like, how do you, I mean, we met in the gym. I see you in the gym. You're super consistent there. Then I saw you again at church with you and your girlfriend. And like, how do you, how do you operate? Like, if we were to say like Tanner's DMOs, his like morning routine, his night routine, like, what does that look like for you to operate at peak performance to handle all these responsibilities?
So I usually will wake up and go straight to the gym. I do that. I get up around 4:30. I usually do that because once my day starts, my team has just gotten so big, I can't
Mhm.
focus. I'm just getting blown up and I'm getting slacked and texted and called and all those types of things. That always really helps me mentally. Fitness for me is more mental
Mhm.
because I get a lot of stress. And so it really helps kind of de-stress me. Once I get back from that, I just start plugging away at work and then I'll work until depends on the day, but like 6:30-ish to 7. So I do work pretty long. And
Mhm.
then after that, I will start decompressing, hang out with my girlfriend, anything like that. So I keep a pretty simple schedule. The things that help the most, though, is just the normal stuff people talk about: drink a lot of water, go to sleep, eat whole foods. The more I
Mhm.
do that, the better I perform, the better my energy is. Whenever I go away from that, it's a little
Mm.
tougher, right? And it makes it harder for me to
Yeah.
perform.
So, I mean, coming from the fitness industry, and that's something I've also too, it's always been like a staple, right? It's like sometimes we just have it earlier on, but I mean, you work with so many people, so I'm sure there's a lot of people that don't have that as their non-negotiable and having like that healthy boundary with themselves. What is the like internal shift? Say somebody's watching this and they're prioritizing their business, but they're not taking care of themselves. I'm sure you hear this all the time. Like, what is maybe like a common belief shift that somebody can adapt in order to like flip that?
Sure. For context, I think it's good for people to know. In some of the beginning phases of my business, I wasn't working out as much as I should. I probably did sacrifice a little bit of my health. And the thought process behind that at the time was, if I go to the gym for quite a bit, I'm there 2.5 hours, which is pretty long.
Hmm.
So when I was starting my companies, I said, if I can get 2 more hours of work in, I can move the business further. So I do think part of what I will tell people is if you have to make a short-term sacrifice, yeah, I think long-term you can't. But in that initial year, for example, I would say I probably took a little bit of hit on my health, but it was worth it to me, like as a trade-off.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as I'm getting older, like I'm in my early 30s, I do notice that I'm a step behind, right? So in my 20s, I feel like I could beat my body up pretty ruthlessly and I'd be fine. I could go out and pretty much do anything. Now I'll notice I'm a step behind. So I'm assuming as I get in my 40s and my 50s, it'll be 2 steps behind, 3 steps behind, 4 steps behind. I think probably like every decade, that's probably what's going to happen. So I think the big mindset shift for me is just, it's two things. One is I'm a very high level go getter type guy. I'm very aggressive. I think if I didn't work out, I probably would have ended up in jail or prison or something because I'm just very aggressive. So the
Hmm.
gym really kind of helps de-stress me and kind of gives me something to go get my aggression out on versus
Hmm.
I think if I wasn't active, it's just with all the stress that comes with the businesses, it's just not good for me. So that's really the first thing that really drives me to go is like
Hmm.
I kind of need it for my mental health, or at least that's how I feel. Going back to your question, I just think if you're not the best version of yourself, it's hard to pour into other people and it's hard to have energy for other people. So it's always just been a staple for me because I just look at the things that make me feel the best. And when I feel better, I can perform better and I can pour into other people better. It's tough when you don't feel good all the time consistently to try to pour into other people. And ultimately, as you grow businesses and you're building teams and you're getting more clients, that's what you're doing. Like you're just pouring into other people constantly. And sometimes it's a little lonely at the top because no one's pouring back into you. So you kind of have to find time to do it yourself.
That was so powerful. And you going back to like what you were saying earlier too about like the long game versus the short game, right? You talked about like that first year in your early 20s where, you did it because you could get away with it. And now as you're getting older, you're seeing like you can't really get away with it. After that first year, because you mentioned about a year, what were like some of the biggest shifts where you're like, I can't keep putting myself last. Like I have to be top tier priority for all these other things to get done at the capacity of my standards.
Yeah, to be fully transparent, I just think I started to look terrible and I didn't like it. That was number one. And then number two is I started having a team. And so as I built a team, the whole point is you get your time back. And so as I got my
Mm,
time back, I thought, well, it makes no sense to have this big company and this big team and then not be able to do stuff I want to do. And it was a really nice feeling when it happened because I went from maybe 3 times a week for an hour, which was pretty terrible workouts, and then I was able to go back to 6 days, 2 to 3 hours, and it's a little excessive, but that's just my time. That's the only thing I feel like I really do for me. Pretty much the rest of the day, I'm either with family or friends or my company or whatever. And so, um, did I answer the question you asked me?
yeah, I mean, it's everybody has like their own experience and like I mean, even for you, I think somebody's like, "Oh, he went from like nothing to something," but your nothing was 3 days a week for an hour. And what you're saying too is like you also had this really it sounds like you're very self-aware, like you had this self-awareness like what do I need? What are my needs and my wants in order for me to operate as my best self? So, the whole point of minding my business is like like you're minding your business, staying in your lane so that you can show up as the highest expression of yourself. But some people are just like they have like 0 days, right? I mean, I'm
Yeah.
sure you work with 50,000 students.
I think everything's trade-offs. So a lot of people, I think they just have to be comfortable with what the trade-offs are. And then I think a lot of times, the trade-offs are too big for me. I just a lot of people when they say they don't have time or they can't do something, they're just saying it's not important.
Hmm.
And I don't think you have to feel like doing stuff all the time. You just have to make that long-term decision. Something that's really blessed me, for better or worse, is I'm really good at ignoring my feelings, right? So some people will
Hmm.
say that's a bad thing, but if you think about it, your feelings change on a day-to-day basis. Some days I wake up and I'm in a bad mood and I don't even know why. It's nothing in particular. I just like
Hmm.
don't really feel like working out or I don't really feel like working. Some days I really feel good. Some days I'm really enjoying life. I think to reach high levels of success or personal development, you have to learn to some degree to ignore your feelings. That's what I call it. I
Yeah.
because if you're only doing stuff based on how you feel, it's very difficult, I think, to be consistent. And it's also very difficult to hit high levels of success because you're human. Like things
Hmm.
happen. Sometimes someone will say something and it triggers me, and I'm thinking, why did that trigger me? That was so stupid. Like I'm annoyed that I'm annoyed. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So sometimes I think a lot of people will dive really deep and they try to figure that out. And instead, I just think, I shouldn't really feel that. And then I try to just move past it versus trying to figure that out. And that's at least been very helpful for me in business, because when you do what you're supposed to do regardless, that's when you'll get results.
And so like you redirect it. So you're like, this isn't how I want to feel. You're not like spending so much time in there, like trying to dive through it. You just like, I don't want to feel this. I want to feel this. So I just got to redirect it and like figure it out fast.
Yeah, I think at the highest levels of personal development, the first step is recognizing when you feel a certain way. And then the highest level would be you don't even feel that way. So I don't know how to get to that level yet, but I think the first step for most people is you just recognize when you feel a certain way and you don't think you should, right? You get upset at something stupid, you say something to someone that you shouldn't have said. And I think that's mostly where I'm at right now. And I've gotten much better at that over time, because in the past, I would just react. And that's what most
Mm-hmm.
people do. So they react. The way you get to a higher level of thinking and personal development is you choose how you're going to react before it happens. So then when it does happen, you've already made the choice and it's easy. So for example, you could take, let's say someone T-bones your car. Most people will get out cussing, screaming, raising their fists. If you've already thought beforehand, and that's where people will talk about like affirmations or manifestation, right? Where you're saying things on a daily basis. So consciously, so that unconsciously those thoughts come to your mind. So when you're in tough situations, you act differently. And then what will happen is people see a person who gets out and they're like, oh, it's okay, like whatever. And they're thinking, how can that person do that? But usually it's because they've already thought about doing it many, many times before, because of
Mm-hmm.
who they want to be, right? Like the state of being, I guess, is the best way to put it.
Mm-hmm. And so like, it sounds like you've also like gotten really great at knowing when it's time to pivot, because redirecting is pretty similar to pivoting. Like how do you know, like how do you what is your like thought process when either something's not working in your business or in your personal life or in just how you're showing up? Like when do you know it's time to pivot? Like do you have a way of identifying change?
Yeah, that's a great question. For most people, they're not very good at the skill. So, meaning when people try to build a business, what usually happens is they say, oh, this guy said do this and it doesn't work, or this person said this and it doesn't work. When in reality, they just suck at the thing. That's
Mm-hmm.
hard for most people to admit. The only way I was able to get past that is I was that person. So most people say this thing doesn't work, they suck, this sucks, right? I was the person who said, I suck, what's wrong with me? I have to fix it. So what would happen is I
Mm-hmm.
would get into, like, if I paid a coach or a mentor, I would do it 10 times what they asked. So if they're like, do 10 outreach messages, I do 100. They're like, do 10 phone calls, I would do 100, like actually. And so what would happen is by the end of the program, I would know, I'm like, they're like, I can't be this dumb, right? I would just think to myself, if it didn't work, I go, there's no way I'm this dumb. So this has to be the wrong strategy. But that to me was really the only way to do it. Now that I've gone to higher levels of business, it's easy for me to see patterns. So I can
Mm-hmm.
know when to stop or when I need to push. I think for beginners, it's tough. So what I would say, if you are a beginner listening to this, you really should just push as hard as you can and do everything that person says and everything to a T, so that at the end you will know. But there's a lesson in that as well. Is like there's benefits in doing something that doesn't work just as well as there's something that does work. And a lot of people don't get that, but the more you fail, the more success you'll have. The most successful people I know have failed the most. And it makes
Mm-hmm.
sense because like failure, if you keep failing, you keep going, right? So if you stop failing, what that means is you're not trying. Like if you never fail, you're not really trying to do anything great, because by definition, if you want to have an extraordinary life, you have to do difficult things. So a reframe for me too is that if I'm not failing a lot or if things aren't going wrong, then it really means I'm not growing as a person. You can't personally develop if everything in your life is easy. So that's been a good reframe for me as well, is just I want to have an extraordinary life, which by definition will mean I will have to conquer difficult things that most people can't do, which helps me push through whenever I want to quit, because that's what an average person would do.
Mm-hmm. So how do you keep focused when life gets chaotic, which it sounds could almost be daily? Like how do you keep that, like everybody I mean, I come across a lot of high achieving entrepreneurs, and everybody wants what you're saying is like you're taking ownership of things. You're not like giving it, it's almost like giving your
Right.
power away. You're giving your power away to somebody else, but they're like, no, I'm claiming my power. I'm taking responsibility for like for sucking at this. And like when life is throwing just chaos at you, whether it being personal or business, like how do you keep that laser focus versus blaming it on like squirrel brain or ADHD or tapping into medication?
I think you nailed the nail on the head right there. Is the first thing is I don't want to give my power away because it makes me feel helpless. So if I
Mm,
say I'm losing because of the economy or the election or this guy or that girl, it's not empowering at all. It's a helpless feeling, and I think that's how people fall into depression. They feel hopeless. So that's the first thing is I don't really care if it's true or not. I don't go there because it's an unempowering, like you said. Number two is just be frank. I have a lot of dark energy from my childhood. I think I got picked
hmm
on a lot as a kid. I just was made fun of quite a bit. I wasn't very good with girls, and I was awkward, and it just a bunch of that stuff. So you will see, and it's normal. You'll see in a lot of adults that are successful. They usually will have a lot of past BS they went through. And part of it, I know this to a degree, like part of why I am the way I am is I'm trying to compensate to prove to people I'm worth something, like that I'm good enough, that I deserve recognition. Um, but I'm okay with that. Like to be frank, I kind of like the way I am now, and I'm grateful for the people who did that when I was younger because it pushed me into who I am. So it's probably those two things. It's just one, like I don't want to give my power away, and then two is I just use really dark energy. That is like I can do this. I am the guy. I am the man. I'm going to show them. I'm going to prove them wrong. And to be frank, it doesn't really matter what you use as long as it works. That's
mm
my mindset.
I mean, it takes a high level of like personal growth and development work to be as aware as you are. So, like, what have you done? Because what you're describing there is called shadow work. It's our shadow traits, and it doesn't like go away. It's all of us. We're dark. We are light. We are all of it. But it doesn't have to run the show. What work have you done to have this like high level of even self awareness?
Yeah. I'd say like a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. I don't know the exact time stamp, but I was going through a pretty dark time in my personal life, and I just wasn't really sure what to do. So one of the good and bad things about me is I push really hard in
Mm,
one direction or the other. So I'll be the guy who either drinks like 10 bottles of tequila or zero. Right? That's
mhm.
it's for better or worse. So what
The
happened at the
extreme.
yeah, so what happened at the time is I just started doing a ton of stuff. So first I went really to the like left, and I went to an ayahuasca retreat, and then I did a bofu, and I did all these psychedelics. Then
Mhm,
I came back and I hired a really well-renowned mindset coach. He charges like 250 a year. I started
mhm,
reading a ton of books, Mastery of Love, Self-Deception and Leadership, The Anatomy of Peace, the four agreements. And so what I started realizing is I look for trends.
mhm,
A lot of people, I don't know, it's like they can't piece together a puzzle. If I keep hearing the same things over and over, at some point I'm like, okay, there's got to be some truth here, right? There has to be something about this. And I think a lot of the problems in my life at that time, to your point, is I was reacting. So someone on my team would do something, I'm like, oh, what an idiot. Or some
mhm,
client would do something like, what if idiot, or and I was always doing that, not realizing that I can control the outcome by choosing how I'm going to be. So a lot of what I've learned is, and those books are great for people to start. Super cheap. Mastery of Love is probably one of my, and Self-Deception and Leadership are probably top two of my favorite books. And I try to reread them consistently because there's a lot of great lessons in there. But I started realizing that all the problems I was having in my life, most of it's how I chose to react, right? Like, and people say that it's not what happens to you, it's like how you react to the situation. And so all these things that were happening in my life, I would say, oh, my girlfriend doesn't get it, she's so stupid, oh, my team's so stupid, and not realizing that I was creating these situations by having those thoughts, and then I was reacting in a bad way. And so I think the biggest thing is I started learning, I started becoming more emotionally aware. I started
mhm,
realizing I was very emotionally immature, and I
mhm,
still do to a degree. Like I think that's part of maturity, is like understanding you have deficiencies and weaknesses. But then what I did, I mean, to be super simple, and this is what anyone could do, is at the core level, I used to be really against mindset stuff because I thought it was kind of stupid. And the reason I thought
Mhm.
it was stupid is some people I think would be in a position in life that I didn't want to be in, and they would say a bunch of woo-woo stuff, in my opinion. And I was like, that doesn't make sense, and you're not living a life I want to live. I finally sat down with a guy who's worth, 9 figures, makes a ton of money. And he basically said, look, you need to write down everything you hate about your life. Like, just go ham. I did it. Then we basically wrote the opposite. And he said, start saying that stuff every day. So something could be is like, for example, I could say, I'm an extraordinary and powerful leader. People love working for me because I put them before myself.
Mhm.
I'm patient in all my dealings. I always think before I speak. I'm kind, stuff like that. And then what happens is it seems kind of dumb. And I'm the type of guy who, I'm the first guy to be like, that's dumb. But
Mhm.
what happened is, as I started getting in tougher situations, because I was saying it consciously, subconsciously, those things would come to my mind, and it would help me redirect and act differently. And then all of a sudden I would see that the situation would de-escalate, and
Mhm.
it wouldn't go in a bad direction. I was like, huh, that's so interesting. And I think the best thing for people to understand is, a lot of time, like, let's say someone is provoking you, and you feel like because they provoked you, you should retaliate, right? You should punch them or curse at them. But what happens is, like, let's say in that situation, if they provoke you and you do not retaliate, those people usually will come down. And
Mhm.
so that it goes back to the same things. You can't control other people, but you actually have a lot more power than you think, because you can, if you can control yourself, then usually what will happen is, if other people are going off around you, by you being controlled and composed, excuse me, they'll come down. And that was actually very eye-opening to me to see a few times, that as I was able to control myself, they would calm down. And I was like, oh
Mhm.
shit. So it's not even me reacting to them. It's like, if I can keep myself under control, even though I'm feeling upset and angry that they're attacking me or whatever, it'll actually will help them also come down. And
Mhm.
I think, to summarize what I'm saying, is life is a mirror, right? Like, it's not a window. Like, when you're getting triggered or people are doing certain things, it's usually because it's a reflection of something going on in you. So as you learn to control yourself and master yourself, those people will reflect that mastery.
Mhm. Mhm. And I mean, that also required you, what I've noticed, and I don't know if you can agree or disagree on this, or if you've seen the pattern with it, but what I've noticed is, like, people will fight taking that time out until they're backed into a corner for something bad to happen. And as entrepreneurs, if you have the ability to take that healthy time out, which is exactly what you did, you went and took the time to find somebody who has what you want, not only that has built what they have on the outer world, but also there was something going on in the inner world that created kind of harmony between both of them. And you identified your subconscious belief blocks. You created new affirmations specifically to your own ones. And I think that's why maybe affirmations don't work for people, is because it's not customized to what's going on in their inner world, because it's different for everybody. What would be like that mindset for somebody's like, I don't have time to take that time out to like work on myself? Like, did you have to, you said you had to get to like such a bad point where you're like, okay, I just got to do it.
Yeah, it's gonna be one of the two things will happen. Either you'll get to a point where you get so low that it forces change, which is, like, that's happened in my life multiple times. Like, I've
Mm-hmm.
made some dumb decisions to the point where I felt so bad or so guilty or so shameful that I was like, man, like, this can't be it. Or you're proactive, and you try to avoid it. But I think that's part of life and learning. I think the reason humans continue to make the same mistakes over and over again, generation after generation, is because there's wisdom in trying to learn from someone else's perspective, but a lot of the truth comes from within. Two things in my life that I really struggle with is, I talk to a lot of high level entrepreneurs, males, and I, would ask them about their relationship situations, and I get a million different answers, right? Of
Mm-hmm.
how to date, how to marry, how that should look. Religion was another one. Growing up, I'd ask different pastors, like, hey, what's the right religion? What's the right way to do it? And they'd all say different things. And I realized after a while, the more people I asked, the more confused I got because it was all their perspective. It was their truth.
Mhm.
They weren't lying. It was just their truth based on their situation. So what I started to realize was that a lot of that has to come from within. And sometimes that will mean you will have to go through bad experiences. I don't think you should purposely try to do that. But at the end of the day, that's some of the most powerful learning, is like you go through something, you make a choice, you go through it, you realize it's the wrong choice, and then you become convicted in the other path. To be frank, like that's some of where my conviction comes from, is it's
Mhm.
not coming from other people. And to be frank, you can't make decisions for other people anyway. So I do think there's you should get advice and you should have good friends and stuff like that. Um, but I do think some wisdom just comes from actually experiencing. And I'm a big fan of books usually now, because when I talk to people, they're putting their opinions on me. But usually in books, not all books, but most books, I find the author is not necessarily forcing their opinion. They're kind of like a third party painting a perspective, or they're telling through stories. And the lesson is within the story that you pull out yourself. So you're not influenced, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
That to me has now become one of my favorite ways to learn, because when I'm being told something by someone else and they're influencing me, you'll just be shocked what your brain does. Your brain will go, oh well, yeah, I mean that sounds right, but he's in a little bit different situation. He doesn't really understand my situation. And like, yeah, I mean that makes sense, but your brain will just try to almost go around through up, down, below. So
Mhm.
that's been really helpful for me, is
Mhm.
just trying to find my own truth within. And what I've done is I've stopped asking people so many questions, more specifically around personal development, and I'm just trying to find the answers on my own. And
Mhm.
I feel a lot more convicted when I do it that way.
Mm. Wouldn't you also say that's like a different level, right? So it's kind of like business when you're first starting, you have no clue on where to go, and also about discernment. And you mentioned like you've gone through a bunch of experiences to funnel out I always say like there's multiple paths to an end destination, and you figured out which path and which learning style was best equipped for you in the season that you're in right now. Because I see life is so seasonal.
Yeah, I mean, I've gone through a ton of stuff. I think what's helped me a lot in my life is I just ruthlessly pursue knowledge.
Mm.
So I'll hire 10 coaches before someone's hired one. I'll read 10 books before they've read one. I'll go to the gym, 6 hours before they've gone 30 minutes. Like, because what I've realized is as you do that, it doesn't really matter if it's the right or wrong decision. The thing is as you ruthlessly do that, the truth will come.
Mhm.
So, but a lot of people are so scared to make any decision, and they just sit in paralysis by analysis that they never go anywhere. And I see this in business all the time. I mean, this is
Mhm.
number one thing I struggle with clients. I tell them to do something, they don't do it. I'm like why? Well, this and this and this, right?
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I mean, I've definitely made a lot of mistakes in my life, but something I've been really good at is I constantly hire mentors. I'm constantly trying to learn. I'm constantly trying to make the right decision. My heart's in the right place. I
Mhm.
think most people who
Mm.
know me know that.
Yeah.
But I make mistakes, and I don't know what I'm doing all the time. But I think when you ruthlessly pursue knowledge and truth, like you'll find it. And a lot of people, they just don't really care that much, or they don't try that much.
Yeah. I mean, something I'm picking up from you too is like that you like speed. And so if you want to get there the fastest, which I learned in yoga actually, it was like people always want to know like, well, how long is it going to take? How long is it going to And you're saying like I 10x'd it. So if I 10x'd it, I know I'm going to get there the fastest and I'll figure it out faster than somebody who's just like 1x'ing
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. I think people think successful people like have some cheat code, and it's like, no, they just did 10 things before you did one. Like
Mm.
I have clients, for example, it'll take them 6 months to do the first thing I tell them to do. I mean, I'll make 6 decisions in 5 minutes. And so it's not, it sounds cliche, and I've done this to myself too. I've had big decisions in my life, and I'll just push it off, push it off, push it off, push it off. And like my life does not progress because I continue to push it off. And as soon as I make the decision, my life will start to move forward again, because
Mm.
it doesn't matter if you make the right or wrong decision, that you'll figure it out. But we're so scared of making the wrong decisions that most people make no decision at all.
Mhm. So how can you even know anyway?
You can always. I think some
Yeah.
stuff I think some stuff you can. I mean, you can get wisdom from other people, but again, like business is one thing. And I think business does have some principles and things that, I'm going to say very similar things in certain business aspects, right? Getting leads, making sales. I think in personal development specifically, or things you can choose. So I'll give you examples like what you choose for religion, how you do you get married, do you have kids? Those are very personal decisions. Um, some of that can be easier for people if they're very religious. But if you're not religious, to be frank, it's not like you're a bad person if you don't have kids. Like, oh my gosh,
Mhm.
you're a horrible person. Oh, you didn't want to get married, right? So I think those types of decisions, a lot of people get stuck in fear because there's not necessarily a right answer. And I can tell you from personal experience in my life, you just need to make a decision. Like you just need
Mhm.
to choose what you think is the best decision at the time, and then you will come to the right conclusion. Because I've done that myself. Like I've sat and I'm like, oh, I don't know. Like, I mean, I can kind of see this way, and I can kind of see this way, and I can kind
Don't
of
you
see
think
this
it's
way.
more stressful to do that than it is to actually make the decision?
Oh yeah. I mean, yeah. Yeah. I just went through a period in my life where I've been going back and forth on a big
Mm.
decision, and yeah, it made my life way worse and it stressed me out. And you get to I think what happened is I got to the point I was so tired of being stressed out that it forced me to move. So I to this day, I still struggle sometimes.
Mhm.
And I will make an excuse for why it took me so long, right? If you ask me, like I'll give you some excuse or reason why it was okay for me to delay.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, it's really, I could have made the decision, 4 months ago, 5 months ago. And I'm
Mm.
basically in the same spot that if I just made the decision then, and I'd be farther along now.
Yeah. Or, it always kept me going is like way back when Grant Cardone first started hosting his events, he said one thing, or maybe it was in his 10X book, and he said, like, excuses are just a way to justify, like, make you feel better for you not doing it. And I was like,
Yeah.
dang.
Yeah, I think most people don't want to say that because it hurts. Like it
Mm.
hurts, it hurts to say I'm not good enough or I don't work hard enough or, you know, but I think a lot of like powers in truth. And so I'm the guy who usually goes that direction. And a lot of people
Mm.
don't like that, I think sometimes because it makes them feel bad about themselves, right? But
Mm.
to me, it's just kind of obvious. It's like, yeah, I mean, the thing you don't want to admit probably is true. The thing you don't want to do, you probably should do.
Mm.
Um, I,
Just
I,
it,
it just is what
you
it, yeah, it
know.
just is what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, clearly you've made a lot of progress. And I mean, so you do know, you know what you know. And there's a few things like that I'm really curious about. I'm sure other people are as well. Like, so that moment that you really went inward, and you're saying too, like you're not going outward so much seeking validation or information at this like season and this stage that you've acquired in your life. You're actually now going inward more.
Mhm.
How has that helped you scale or prevent a lot of malpractices in business?
Yeah. I mean, I think first things first, I'm definitely still not perfect. I still make mistakes. Um, but when you start to realize, everything's within and you can control it, your life will be more peaceful, it'll be less stressful. You
Mhm.
won't get bothered by stuff people do. I started to realize too, I used to get really upset in the past if someone would say something negative to me. And I started to realize that's just some inner conflict they're dealing with. That's why they're doing that. The same reason I do it, right? Like if I say something rude to someone, it's not something they did, it's something about me. Like it's a story I've told myself. So it's just given me a lot of perspective and it's given me a lot of power back to realize so in the past, when I would get mad, I might say, oh, Tanya did this, like F her. But now I'm just sitting there like, why did that bother me?
Mm.
And I'm like sitting there going like, why did that comment she said bother me? And then,
Mhm.
how can I react better next time? And I still like, I still make mistakes because I think I push so hard.
Mm.
At least that's maybe an excuse I tell myself. I work 16 plus hours a day. I'm trying to work out, 6 days a week, 2 hours a day. I'm trying to have good relationships. I'm trying to make, nine,
Mm.
10 figures of income. I'm trying to I'm trying to do everything. So
Have it
sometimes
all.
yeah. So sometimes at the end of the day, I'll be like at zero gas and,
Mm.
someone says something and I'll snap and I'm like,
Hmm.
I'm like, fuck, I
Yeah.
shouldn't have said that. But again, I just think there's a lot of power in recognizing that. And
Mm-hmm.
I forget what law it is, but it's, the one where it says the smartest people in the world realize how much they don't know, and the dumbest people in the world,
Mm-hmm.
think they know everything. It's the same concept here. The more you realize that it's you and not other people, you'll take your control back. And it took me a long time to understand that, because when I heard this, like if I was talking to myself now 2 years ago, I would just roll my eyes at this stuff because
Mm-hmm.
it didn't make sense to me. It makes a lot more sense to me now because I've read so many books and I've worked with so many coaches. But I think like for some people, they may have to go through that, because 2 years ago, if I'd heard this talk, I just would have rolled my eyes for sure. Like it wouldn't even make
Yeah.
sense to me.
Yeah. What what would you say as far as like, because you mentioned a few times about like your inner circle and the people that are close to you. And I remember one day at church, one of the pastors was saying, the people in your inner circle, the people that have your ear, they have your future. And that just hit. And what are some of the core values that you carry with you that are like non-negotiables for the people that really get to know you at a vulnerable level, like really get to know you?
Um, I really value work ethic.
Mm,
I respect it. I can see it when people do that. I think most people do. So really, like work ethic. Um, I'm big on loyalty. And to be honest with you, I think it's because I've been disloyal in the past. So that's why I feel that way so much.
mm-hmm,
And really, really maybe not even loyalty, but just being honest.
mm,
Just being super honest. I really respect people. If I look at the guys I respect the most, you would laugh because it's so wide ranging. So over here we've got like I've got Andrew Tate, and then I got like Alex Hormozy, and then I got like Justin Waller, and then I've got like one of my guys named Sohab Alberno, and like these guys couldn't be more different. But I think the reason I respect them, and what I've realized for me is probably the number one thing I respect in individuals, is they just seem very certain about the way they're living their life. You know what I mean? The people
mm-hmm,
who you meet them and they're like, yeah, like I do this and I do this, and I have caffeine and I drink, or whatever they say, and they're
mm-hmm,
just like, yeah, this is definitely the best way to live, and they're so convinced that the way they're living is the right way that it makes me question the way I'm living. You know what I mean? And that's what I've kind of realized. I respect those types of people who, to me, it seems like, at least to me, right? I don't know I know every single one of those guys very personally. Obviously, I don't know Andrew
mm-hmm,
Tate personally, but it seems to me that they've done the work to try to get to where they think truth is, and then they're living the best way they think they should based on that. And whether they're right or wrong, obviously you're going to get both sides of the spectrum. That's not really what I care about. I don't really care who's right or wrong because I'm not here to judge. I don't like care.
mm-hmm,
I just find it fascinating, and those are the people I respect the most, that seem very certain, because you can tell. And I
mm-hmm,
think those are the people who usually can persuade people and are good leaders, because people just sit there and they're like, man, this guy really thinks he's right. And that's very intriguing to me, because I think sometimes I have doubt in myself on how I should be living, or maybe the right way to live, and so I'm very drawn to those types of individuals, and those are usually in my inner circle, because I just respect them like a lot
mm-hmm.
because of that.
So it's almost like they trust themselves and their path so much in moments. Because if we're talking about shape shifting things, the opposite of doubt would be trust.
Yeah, and it's they're so certain about it regardless of what
Mm,
other people say. So for example, like I said, Andrew Tate, guy gets massive hate,
mm-hmm,
and there's probably some truth to it, whatever. Again, but he just seems like he's sure, like he's like, yeah, this is the right way to live. Or you take a guy like Patrick Bet David, who's a little bit different from him, but he's
mm-hmm,
the same way. And he gets hate as well. But I just respect how they're so certain regardless of what other people say. And I think at some
mm-hmm,
point in your life, everyone has to get there, because someone's always going to have something to say. So you getting to where you believe you should be and how you should live your life, regardless of what other people say, or talk about you on social media or whatever, that
mm-hmm,
takes a lot of courage, and it takes like a lot of confidence, because
mm-hmm,
like different when you see different things on social media or in public, whatever, you're getting influenced, right? And so your brain's like, hey, maybe I shouldn't do that, or maybe I should do this. And so when people just get to a point, they're like, nope, like this is what I'm doing. This is what I'm comfortable with. This is how I'm living my life.
Yeah, like
I don't
lasered
care.
in.
Yeah, it's just inspiring for me. And I appreciate that, because the question I have is like, how are you so sure? And they're just like, I
Mm,
know. Like I just know. And I'm like, what are you gonna say that, So for right or wrong, it's not really a thing if like I agree with everything they say. Some of my good friends I don't agree. Like I'm like,
yeah.
I don't see it that way. But they do it in such a way, and they're so confident with it that I'm like, man, I respect that. Like that
Mm-hmm.
you think that you're doing things the right way and you're like living in your truth, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then what about your like even like when you chose your girlfriend, like just the core values of like certainty, loyalty, honesty. Is there any of the other like common things when you're like, man, I guess what you're saying is like it's almost like being around people that inspire you to be better
Yeah.
and challenge you to step into your personal power and your, those traits.
Yeah, I mean, you know, my girlfriend's better than I deserve. She's
Mm,
like an outstanding human being. Um, I think that's what attracted me to her, is just she's just like a ray of sunshine, and she's
mhm,
always happy. I'm not the happiest guy. I don't think I'm this, like some of my friends they'll make jokes. They're like, hey, he's like the Grinch, or he's grumpy. And I don't know if it's really that I'm grumpy. I'm kind of like, glass half empty, realist, like life is hard, gotta push. And then she's on the other side of the spectrum, and she's always happy and she's always smiling and everybody loves her, and she's always finding the positive in things. And I would say the biggest traits though is like loyalty. She's like one of the
mhm,
most loyal people I know. She's happy. Um, I think a very attractive trait in women is just be happy. Like
mm,
especially for me, because like as a guy who's trying to push, I think life can be very difficult at times. Like, um, I'll talk about it to my brothers and my family. I in my 20s, no one respected me because I had nothing and I was nothing, right? Or at least on paper. And now in my 30s, I finally got some respect, right? People are like, hey, you've
mm,
done this, you've done that. And so it can be hard for a guy. I'm not saying it's not hard for women, but I think for guys, like that can be tough,
mm,
because you have to kind of go out and prove your worth. And so just having someone who's really happy to kind of like at the end of the day just keep your spirits up, loyal,
mm,
honest. And I also like, that she's like she has drive. And I don't care what the drive is, but I like someone who they have ambition, right? Like they want to be the best gardener on earth, or they want to like start a company, or they want to
mm,
have, 10 kids and all they care about is having it. I don't really care. It's just I want to be with someone who's ambitious, and
mm.
is driven to progress and become a better person. Because at the end of the day, no matter how many mistakes I make, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to become the best version of myself. And it's hard to be around someone if they're just kind of coasting by.
Mm, that's so powerful. I hope she heard all that.
We'll see.
I met her. She's got great energy. She is because you can't fake energy. And she does radiate. So it's really cool to like actually meet her. What would you say as far as like your future self, right? Like say we're having this conversation or we're revisiting it November 2nd, 2025. Who do you have to become the next 12 months in order to step into these goals and visions? Because I'm sure you have goals and visions already planted out. You're definitely not a drifter. You don't achieve what you've achieved drifting. There's definitely an execution plan, but who do you have to become these next 12 months and to step into a higher expression of yourself?
Yeah, I think I'm on the right path. I just have to keep going.
Mm,
I think I have to keep just personally developing. Something that I saw in business was interesting was basically you can get to 100,000 a month, or that's probably about the number, pretty much by yourself. You can have like two employees, maybe three, and it's just pure grind, just grind,
mm,
grind, 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 work, work, work. And then you get to a point in the business where you realize there's not enough time in the day anymore. Like you can grind all day and you still won't get everything done. And so I started to realize that that's why they talk about building a team. And that's why they talk about being a good leader. And if you think about it, if you're going to lead a lot of people, you have to be someone they aspire to be usually. Right. And so sometimes when I look at my deficiencies, I'm thinking, no one on my team is like, man, I aspire to be quick to get mad like Tanner, or like, oh, I aspire, like no one says that. So I think it's just continuing to personally develop to become someone that people aspire to be like, so that I can actually lead people to do big
Mm,
things. Because I think that's the highest level skill set, is if you can get to a level where you can actually turn into a leader where people will follow you, you can do very big things. You can change the world, but you just can't do it by yourself. And so that
mhm,
takes a much higher level of personal development, because people, you don't like everyone, or someone says something that triggers you, and you have to learn to like handle that.
mhm.
Right. So I think it's
Yeah.
just, I think it's just continue to drive down that path. And
Mm,
I'm happy with where I'm at. Like I've always been very proud of myself, and like how I try to attack life and how I try to improve. And I always
mm,
feel like I get to the right place. But yeah, it's
mm.
just pushing harder in that direction and continuing to go.
I really love that you said that. Not trying to boost your ego or anything like that, because I think you're the first person that I've been, and I just started bringing men onto the show, but I've been asking this question for probably about 2 years now. I'm minding my business, and you're the first person where you're just like, I'm just continuing to put in the reps, kind of like working out, where you have your routine, you have your program design, and then you just got to be consistent with it, and then you progressively build strength, right? It's like a muscle. And so, yeah, that was really cool that you said that, because I agree with you. Sometimes we just have to keep going and keeping that consistency. And I think more people need to hear that. There's not like a new next thing or this and that. It's like you have to integrate stuff.
Yeah, a cheat code to life. Well, it sometimes it can be depressing, but sometimes it can be empowering. So there was a documentary with Michael Jordan recently called The Last Dance, and
Mm,
he had some quote in there where he, to the effect, this is not going to be word for word, but it was to the effect of, whenever I get to the next level, or whenever I win, and I pushed as hard as I thought I could go, I realized like there's even more I could have pushed. This kind of mentality David Goggins has, right? He does a lot of
mhm,
crazy like ultra marathons and stuff. And so that's been a cheat code for me, is that part of what makes me excited about life is you never get to the finish line. Like you can literally always improve, always. Like there, you can get better in fitness or health or wealth, or like there's just levels and levels and levels to the game. Like, and the game never ends. That can be very empowering, because you just try to become the best version of yourself every single day until you die. Right. And
mhm.
you don't like,
There's
and that's
never
the end
like
of the
a
game.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah, there
I,
doesn't like exist.
yeah. And at the same token, sometimes if you're having a bad day, that can be a little depressing, because you're like, what's the point of that? Like, what's the point of always trying to be your best? Um, but I feel happiest, you know, people always talk about happiness, and it gets me
Mm,
annoyed. Sometimes I get annoyed because they talk about it like it's the objective.
mm,
And to be honest, I think when I felt the best in my life consistently, I'm just focusing on trying to be the best person I can be, trying to serve others, trying to develop. And then happiness is a byproduct of that, versus trying to actually chase happiness. And
mm,
I think a lot of people miss the mark on that. And I think trying to be happy is a massive waste of time, because it's like a feeling. It's like it's a state. And
mhm,
sometimes you can feel it and sometimes you can't. But I think more often people will feel good or better when they're kind of pushing in their purpose, and they're not constantly thinking about it, right? Like when it goes back to the same thing. When you're always thinking about yourself, usually you're pretty miserable. I took a sabbatical last year for 6 months. I didn't work a single day, never done it before. And I got back and started working, and I didn't even realize how shitty I felt. It was almost like the person who eats
mm,
McDonald's every day and then they start eating salads. And I was like, oh my gosh, I was super, I was not in a good place. I didn't even realize
mhm.
it. So, all that to say, I just think if people will just try to personally develop and be the best version of themselves, they'll feel better consistently, instead of trying to chase happiness as the goal. It's just a byproduct.
Mhm. I love that. It's like a funnel system, right? If you know you want to be happy, then you have clarity on your inner world, and then your outer world, you just align people, places, and things with it. This makes me happy. This doesn't make me happy. And you keep doing those things to keep that consistent feeling or sensation of that happiness.
Hmm.
So it's really the byproduct of your actions and what you're doing or you're not doing. sometimes. Sometimes it's undoing. And with that being said, like in order to achieve that next level of leadership, because it sounds like that's really important to you, part of your purpose and your mission and your gifts, what do you have to overcome to like achieve that progressive growth? Like parts of yourself right now for you to make that progressive growth as like Tanner today versus your future Tanner self. Like if you could say like one thing that you're going to actively work on that would make a huge impact on your progress, what would that like one thing be to like, who do I have to overcome? Like what version of myself do I have to overcome?
Yeah, probably two things. I think one thing is just higher levels of patience,
Hmm.
right? Part of what's made me successful is I just ruthlessly attack and I just go, go, go. And so when you're dealing with other people, sometimes I have to be more patient, right?
Hmm.
Because in my head, when I tell them something and they don't do it, I'm like, what is wrong with you? You know?
Hmm.
I think there's that. Um, the other thing is that I'm experiencing right now that I'm trying to figure out is certain, I don't want to get into too specific, but certain things in life that create dopamine,
Hmm.
and trying to figure out the balance if at all. So some people, for example, let's just use alcohol. That's the easy one, but some people don't drink at all. Some people drink a lot. Some people drink a little bit. That's a very interesting thing I'm going through right now where I'm trying to figure that out, because I'm not like super for, super against. I'm just, I'm a healthy
Hmm.
guy, but and it's not alcohol per se, but there's things in my life where I'm trying to figure out, should I be in the middle? Should
Hmm.
I be way over here? Should I not be over here? And the reason that's one of the things I think I need to conquer is it's taken up a large amount of my bandwidth over the last year.
Hmm.
Um, it just has, because I'm kind of at that point in my life where I'm really trying to figure out who I am. I grew up with my parents, and my parents were very religious, and I kind of did what they wanted. And then I just started building the business, and I didn't really care about anything except building my business. And now I'm at a point where I can step back and kind of enjoy if I want.
Hmm.
And so, you know, that's something I've been thinking about very deeply, because some people, especially in Miami, you see people on both sides of the spectrums. And so,
Yeah.
part of me is just like, hey, is there something wrong with that? Like, should I be in the middle? Should I not do it? But like trying to find the answer for myself. And so those are
Hmm.
probably the two biggest things.
Yeah, like what's best for you. I think it comes back to like you're saying and like that certainty and like what's best for me. And sometimes things are just seasonal, right? So sometimes things aren't like a forever, they're just more seasonal. But I don't know if
Mm-hmm.
you've read Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill. That book gave me a lot of clarity on things. And I know it's given a lot of people clarity on it. Phenomenal book. I mean, it's by Napoleon Hill. So,
Yeah,
he's
I'll have
there's
to
a thing or
reread
two.
it. I think I read it in the past, but I think it was a little hard for me to read, or maybe I got bored, but I never finished it. So I just wrote it down. I'm going to read it again.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely revisit because maybe now, like you said, a year or 2 years ago,
I wasn't
that
open to it.
Tanner,
Yeah.
exactly. And I like how we're saying, like, sometimes it's okay, like, to revisit things because now you're in a different, like, mindset and you're open to receiving
Hmm.
because you never know what you're going to get out of it. But I know that book specifically, what you're saying was a big shifting for a lot of people, including myself, where I had clarity. Because when we have clarity, that's when we can execute a lot differently for what we're wanting, for
Hmm.
minding our business, staying in our lane, and just trying to be our best selves. With that being said, we've talked about so many things today, and I always like to end with like, if you were to give the listeners one thing that they can integrate in their life that would create an impact or get them to make some form of progress, what would that one thing be?
So be one of two things. First one is you could just hire a mentor or a coach like that. It sounds very cliche,
Mhm.
but I started making massive progress in my life when I started doing that. Um,
Even
it just,
financially?
yeah. I mean, so the first 2 years of my business, I made 2 grand. Then I hired a mentor, and then the last six I've done, we're about 115 million now. Just crossed
Mm,
115 million. It's a pretty big difference.
huge.
Um, and it just gives you a chance to learn faster. Like everything to me is about speed and feedback loops. The second thing is make a promise to yourself and never break it.
Mm,
A lot of the times in my life where I felt the worst, I realized it came from shame and guilt. And the shame and guilt didn't come from other people. It came from breaking promises I made to myself. Like, I'm not this type of person. And then I would do something against that. People break promises to themselves all the time. They don't take the promises very seriously. So if you
mm,
make a promise, for example, like, I will never drink again, I'm not saying you have to, but could be that. Or I'm going to go to the gym every day.
mm.
You will build confidence about who you are when you consistently keep the promises you make to yourself. And you'll find life will be easier and you'll feel much happier and more fulfilled because you'll realize that you are who you say you are, right? You'll have
Mm.
proof that you're this type of person instead of you're like, oh, I'm a good person. But then when it comes time to be a good person, you're a shithead. Or, I'm disciplined. But then when it comes time to like, be disciplined, you have a whole cheesecake. Like it's not like it's not like anyone's like judging you're going to go to hell or whatever. It's just, deep down, the reason you feel guilty or shameful is you're not really who you say you are. So
Mm.
if you can do just one of those two things, that'll really help your progress. And the highest levels, I think, of personal development is people who always keep their commitments, always, like always, even if it seems dumb. And it's hard. It's hard sometimes. But that's kind of the next level I'm trying to get to too, is like I always keep my commitments.
Yeah. I mean, commitment is just such a powerful word. I feel like everything is a byproduct of the commitment and the commitment to yourself, which comes down to how much do you love yourself, which
Mhm.
impacts, what is it? It's like we can only love to the capacity of how well we love ourselves.
Mhm.
Right, and that kind of pours into everything and how we treat people. Wow, that's so powerful. Thank you so much for being so open and so vulnerable, because I do
Sure.
believe vulnerability is such a strength, and I think we need to hear more of that, especially from our men. And I know that's one of the strongest forms of leadership, where just being open and real, and giving other people to have permission to do the same. So thank you for that. I think it takes a lot of courage to do that, specifically being on a platform. And
Yeah.
thank you for our listeners for being here. Thank you for sharing your time. And we appreciate you hanging out with us when you could have been anywhere else. Make sure, if you found value in today's episode, that you screenshot this, you share it in your stories, you tag Tanner, you tag myself, so we can acknowledge you, we can see you, we can just say thank you. The whole point of this show is to help you elevate your business, your mindset, and your life. Enjoy the show.